There is one major message that I try to bring in each of my lectures. It is basically that the public perception on the American political system, even to a certain extent in the United States itself, is that it is a presidential system, whereas in reality it is a system that is built on the interaction between the president and a number of other players, among which the members of Congress. And that really complicates the ability of a president to achieve, to realize its own political agenda. But I do believe that the strategy of Obama, that is investing first in the economic stimulus package, secondly, investing in healthcare reform, even despite all the risks, the political risks with the healthcare reform, but the fact that he finally got his reform increased his political capital in Washington, D.C., and I think that that in the future will continue to help him to achieve other elements of his political agenda. But a lot will debate on the outcome of the congressional elections later this year. I would certainly choose the reform of the healthcare insurance system. And the reason is twofold. First of all, because it was a very controversial issue, and despite the fact that there was a lot of opposition, President Obama invested a lot of political capital in order to get the reform, and finally, after a while, he got the reform. And secondly, because since decades there is in the United States a discussion about healthcare reform, about the problem of many Americans not being insured, about the problem of many Americans being underinsured. And that in itself gives a certain significance to the fact that healthcare reform finally succeeded. The fact that it was so controversial that many administrations tried to reform it. The Clinton administration felt how difficult and complicated it was to do so. But at the end of the day, Obama succeeded in getting this reform. And I think that decades from today, people will be looking back at the Obama administration's biggest achievement in specifically that area, the area of healthcare reform. I think that the answer to that question is an answer that should be related to the political system, the American political system. The expectations vis-à-vis Obama have been extremely high. They have been too high. That is certainly my opinion. Why? Because the American president is not the only player in Washington, D.C. He's an important player, but he needs to play the game with other players in Washington, D.C. And these other players will also to a certain extent determine, affect to what extent the president will be able to achieve his political agenda. Take the issue of financial reform. The debate on financial reform is still going on. It may be the case that Obama will achieve a certain success in that respect as well. One of the priorities that he had was the agency, is becoming a bureau now, for consumer financial interest protections. And he probably will get it. But the financial regulation issue also shows how a president, in case he wants to achieve something, needs to collaborate with people in the American Congress. And different from what we have in Western Europe, the level of party discipline in the United States is relatively low, meaning that you need to construct coalitions, that you need to construct majorities, and that is not always simple, specifically not in the Senate, given the special majorities you need over there. My expectation is that on financial regulation we will have a certain outcome. It will come first in, well, it already took place in the House, there will be an outcome in the Senate, and then we expect somewhere in June a bill on the table of the president that he can sign. That is certainly another issue that will come up. For the other issues, I'm not sure. I mean, I know that immigration is getting on the top of the political agenda, that in itself is not uncontroversial. I know that energy legislation is on the table, but even there we don't know for sure how large the support is in the US Congress and specifically the US Senate. And of course the electoral dynamic is going to play increasingly a role, in the sense that members of Congress are running for office, are running for re-election, and their minds are more and more on those elections on November the 2nd this year, and less on helping the president in achieving his agenda. I think that he has, from the point of view of today, and given a number of parameters that we can know today, there is a relatively decent probability that Obama will be re-elected, but it depends on a number of issues. The first issue is who is going to be his opponent in the Republican Party. Are the Republicans, if the Republicans think that they have a chance to win in 2012, they are going to put forward a very strong political figure that will compete with Obama. A second issue is the economy, and that is an even more important issue. And here I think it is, the situation is a little bit to the benefit of Obama. He has become president at the depth of a very strong economic recession. We do see that economic growth is picking up again, at least on a quarterly basis. But we also see that unemployment remains relatively high, and we also know that the high unemployment figures undermine the political capital of President Obama. Well, we do expect, however, that by 2012 the worst will be over, and that may benefit President Obama in his efforts to be re-elected. And a comparison is made in this regard with Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was at the bottom of his popularity with even lower approval ratings than Obama has now. At the end of '82, when congressional elections were taking place in the beginning of '83, and the reason was a deep economic recession and high unemployment levels. But by '84, the economy was in a much better shape. Employment was going down, was getting lower and lower, and at the end of the day, no real strong Democratic candidate took the risk to run against Ronald Reagan, which facilitated basically his re-election in '84. People expect that the same kind of logic could be working to the benefit of Obama today.